Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I've got back my mate, the Parish of Rock. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good. Hello, Peter. Great to be back. Really looking forward to the show.
Absolutely. We are going to do a desert island disc. So we're picking the band acdc, legendary Australian band. The premise of the show is you've got to choose one studio album that you would take to your desert island. So, what I might get you to do, Parish, is put the album up, and I will at the same time. And our desert island disc is oh, the Bonscott era,
Yeah,
Highway to Hell, and Power Age.
Power Age. Yeah,
So, absolutely no collusion in this episode, folks. I had no idea. I actually had it in my head that you might have picked a Brian album, but we'll talk about that as we get deeper into the
yeah,
episode.
yeah.
So, maybe your initial thoughts and comments
Well,
about
let,
why
let
you
me
picked
start.
that album.
Well, I'll start by saying this was actually really difficult, and I think a lot more difficult than it should have been, and I'll explain why I say that in a minute. But I think I ended up overthinking it really. So I kept thinking, do I go with a Bon album or a Brian album? Do you go with the best-selling rock album of all time in Back in Black? Do I go with an early album, maybe High Voltage or Dirty Deeds, which I love both of those albums as an example. Do I go with Power Age, which for a long time actually was my favourite ACDC album? But in the end, I did go with Highway to Hell, and I went with that, and for the simple reason is it is my favourite album of all time. So that's what I'm saying. I think I was overthinking it. I kind of thought I'm not going to pick it because it is my favourite album. It would be the obvious one, but I just couldn't miss it. It's my favourite album of all time. It was one of the very first concerts I went to was ACDC in the Highway to Hell tour in at Hammersmith Odeon, which was about two to 3 months before Bon passed away. So I've got huge memories of that. We'll go through the songs a bit later, but it's got a song on there that's my favourite ACDC song. So eventually I caved into the obvious really, and
Yeah,
went with Highway to Hell.
nice. Well, that was way in my calculations, but I did sort of yield to Power Age simply because I feel like I've grown up with this album. Firstly and foremost, like Bon is part of the Australian rock fabric. I just remember seeing him on music shows in Australia like Countdown or Sounds, etc., etc. I followed the whole ACDC story where they, got on that jet plane and went to England and, were working their way up the rock
Yeah,
totem pole. So I just feel like I grew up with Bon, and but that's not to say that I didn't like the material that Brian did. Back in Black is a masterpiece, and it hasn't sold so many squillion albums for no reason. It is a,
yeah,
a, a beautifully produced album of taut rock and roll. But I just come back to this album because I really like the Bander and Young sound. It's very
yeah,
organic, it's all very fresh. And I just think of all the Bon albums prior, in that on that Albert's label, there's always, I wouldn't say they're patchy, but there's always a little bit of filler. But I just think with Power Age was where top to bottom, left to right, up and down, all the songs are killer.
yeah.
And you could easily slot any of the songs in their song list and it would just be absolutely seamless. And you got Angus Young, Malcolm Young, Bon Scott, Phil Rudd, Cliff Williams. This is the
Yeah,
quintessential lineup.
yeah.
There they are.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, to be honest, that was the album that I started with. So the very first thing I heard from AC/DC was Rock and Roll Damnation as a single. I
Yeah.
heard that on the radio when they used to play sort of late night radio over here with people like John Peel. And I heard that. Went out the next day and bought it. And it had Rock and Roll Damnation. And then B-side was Sin City. So that was kind of my introduction to AC/DC.
Yeah.
About a couple of weeks later, I bought Power Age, so that was the first album. And as I say, for a long time, that was my favourite album. But over
Yeah.
the years, slowly, Highway to Hell has taken it over. And as I say, is now probably my favourite album of any band
Yeah.
of all time.
Yeah. And I think both those albums really distill the
Yeah,
essence of what makes acdc so bloody brilliant. You've got
yeah,
the street rock poetry of Bon Scott. You've got the wonderful riffs of Malcolm Young, the Angus Young, and that wonderful Chuck Berry flair or vibrato. The thumping bass of Cliff and Phil, and that
yeah,
metronomic drums. I mean, like I come across so many drummers that say the hardest drum beat to play is the
oh, it is.
Phil Rudd four on the floor
Yeah.
because it's so metronomic, and it's quite deceiving how difficult it is. So, all right, well, why don't we go to you and spotlight a song, and we'll take it in turns, spotlighting songs off our favorite ACDC album.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with the opener and the title track, Highway to Hell. I think I mean, that riff is so distinctive. And I was at I went to a pub quiz a few years ago, and one of the questions they played Highway to Hell introduction, and the question was, which song does this come from? And then when the guy gave the answer, he gave it as Back in Black, and everybody in the pub, and I'm talking about from sort of teenagers all the way up to people in their 80s, everybody shouted, no, it's not, it's Highway to Hell. So
Mm.
it kind of tells you how distinctive and how well known that opening riff is. And I think if I was going to pick any song to sort of say this is typical ACDC, I would pick Highway to Hell. I just think from the opening chords all the way through the solo, the lyrics, it just kind of sums them up. And I've said to my wife that I want Highway to Hell played at my funeral. And the reason for that isn't the obvious of that, but I spend most of my time on the road. I spend most of my time travelling up and down the motorway network in the UK, and I want it played because of the lyrics: no stop signs, speed limit, nobody's going to slow me down. And to me, that's what it's going to be for me when I pass away. I'm no longer going to have to drive around the motorway network. So that's why I'd like it at my funeral. My wife has told me absolutely no way. I'm not going to have it, but I've told both my sons to make sure it does happen. Yeah, I just think it, and also I just think it's a fantastic song. It's got a great chorus. It's very hooky, but
Yes.
it's not overly commercial. It's not like a lot of commercial rock is. It's still got the energy and the drive and the riffing. And you say about the rhythm section. I mean, for me, I had to pick an album that I mean had obviously would have Malcolm on it, but also had to have Phil and Cliff on it as well. And as we know, a few of the Brian Johnson albums don't have Phil Rudd on them. So to
Mm.
me, it had to be that core rhythm section, and I suppose had to be that five really. So yeah, so to me, I just think that song sums up ACDC really in
Yeah.
3.5 minutes or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And the stories I heard when the executives at Atlantic Records got out the stereo and cranked it up, they were quite ecstatic. They
Yeah,
knew straight away that this was going to be a hit.
yeah, yeah.
But unfortunately, Bon was not able to sort of see
No,
the rewards. Anyway,
yeah,
my first song of Power Age is actually probably the bastard son connection to your song. It's Rock and Roll Damnation, because it's
yeah,
in that genre of people looking at rock and roll as a career and the downside of rock. So it's
yeah,
sort of similarly themed. It's got those crunchy power chords, wonderful riff, and a great Bon lyric. And he's a very expressive singer because you can feel his personality. He's part rascal, part rock troubadour, but you can feel all the emotion. He's one of the Australia's greatest frontman, and would have been interesting to see if he was alive, how he would have been, you know, in the late 80s. It's a great what
yeah,
if. Was he built for those times? I don't think so. I think
yeah,
he was a bit of die young, live fast type of
yeah,
character. But Rock and Roll Damnation, is very similar to Highway to Hell. And I think, I love those stories, that those sort of lyrics where he talks about the downside of the rock and roll lifestyle. It's not all, you know, wonderful.
Yeah,
It's the downside, and it's all in that song.
yeah, but fun. But the song's still a fun song, isn't it? Even though
Yep.
he's taking apart what it's like to be trying to make your way in the rock and roll world. You
Yeah.
can still tell he's enjoying it and loving every minute of it, even
Yeah.
though he's not glorifying it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an ongoing theme. I was just came to my
Yeah,
mind. It's a long way to the top.
yeah,
Is It's sort of, that's like a pseudo national anthem in Australia. A
yeah.
one song that they don't play very often, unfortunately. But yeah, that's a very similar thing. Could you
They
pop
would
up
have to
that?
bring the bagpipes on stage. That's why they probably haven't got the
Yeah.
bagpipe players.
Well, the story goes that Angus won't play it because Johnny Farnham, or John Farnham of You're the Voice
Yeah,
fame, who
yeah,
you may be
yeah,
familiar with,
yeah, yeah.
used
No,
to sing
yeah.
used to sing that in concert. And he thought, no, I'm not going to be playing it. So
Oh, I see.
bit of
Okay,
a
fair enough.
bit reactionary to that. Would you be kind
Yeah,
enough to show the 45 single of Rock and Roll Damnation again? I just love that
yeah.
cover. I brought a smile. Oh, I love it. It's
I don't
great.
think this is the original. I don't think this is the original version though, because
Yeah.
I got it when it first came out,
Yep.
and this is. I mean, this shows you this is on the studio. This is the studio song. It's not but it says on the back, taken from the album "If You Want Blood."
Hmm. Okay, there you go.
I must have bought it subsequently to get the original one, probably because of the cover. I probably saw that in the record store
Yeah.
and loved the cover because probably
Oh,
I probably didn't
it's a
have a
great
picture
cover. Is
sleeve.
it on the Atlantic
But
label?
yes, it is. Yeah,
Gotcha.
and
All right.
yeah, but the fact it says taken from "If You Want Blood" is the thing that so, makes me well. It's just wrong because it is the studio version. So
And folks, the live album, If You Want Blood, is absolutely a superb live album. If
it
you want to
is.
have the ACDC experience, and for that matter, the movie Let There Be Rock, that's a
Well,
great movie.
I think all the live albums are good. So the one from the 80s or early 90s, I
Mm.
think it was. I think that's really good.
Yep.
I think that was really liked it at the time. And to have on record Brian Johnson singing some of the Bonscott records for the first time, I thought was
Mm.
great. And then the this is the album version, but if you watch the video of River Plate, I mean it live at the River Plate. If you watch, I mean they've got it on YouTube now, so and I watch it regularly. It just shows you how big they are all over the world. I mean the audience are absolutely frantic, and they are singing every single words to every single song. I think this would have been the Black Ice tour from memory. And even yeah, it is, and even the new songs on that, or what would have been new at the time, the audience know every single song, and that's a brilliant concert as well. So I think all of the live stuff that you can get of ACDC just shows you how brilliant they were, or
I
still
think that
are. Yeah,
I still think they're the biggest rock band in the world, to be quite frank. I
yeah. I
think
think.
they're a consistently huge draw card.
Well,
Uh,
I went to get tickets for Wembley in the summer, and I went on an hour early, and the queue was. I mean, Wembley holds 70,000 people, and I was in a queue of over 200,000 people.
yep. Yep.
And that was an hour before. And I was lucky. I got tickets because I ended up coming off the queue and went direct to Wembley. So rather than doing it through Ticketmaster, I thought I'll never get. There's too many people in front of me to get tickets. Although it was for I think it was across 3 or 4 days, so I might have got tickets. So I
Yeah.
thought I'd give it a go and just see if Wembley was selling any directly, and luckily they were. And I managed to get some really decent seats through Wembley. But the thing was, it sold out within 24 hours. All the
Yeah.
gigs across the UK sold out, and I think probably across the whole of Europe because they've added extra dates in Europe as well. So it shows you how big a draw. And these are big stadiums. These aren't arenas. So
I think they're the sort of band that the casual rock
yeah,
listener likes and will go to see them.
yeah,
They're also cross generational. So you go to the stadium and you'll see fathers bringing their sons or daughters, and it's
yeah,
like a whole
yeah.
family event. So
It is. Yeah,
um, There are some bands that just wither on the vine and that's it. But
Yeah.
ACDC is definitely cross-generational.
I would say it's between them and the Stones are probably still the biggest rock bands in the world. I mean, the
Yep,
Stones are a similar draw whenever they've in the last few years
yep, yep. I'd
toured.
say
So
ACDC is probably a bigger draw card than Metallica because I'm thinking in
yeah, yeah,
heavy metal
yeah,
sense. I think they're a bigger draw card. If you were
yeah.
putting a lineup and you had to put somebody at the top, Metallica would be supporting
And
ACDC.
I think Metallica would have no problem with that. I mean,
No.
there's probably not many bands that they would happily be
Mm.
special guests to, but I suspect ACDC is one of the few.
And speaking of the Stones, this album, Heath plays this every night before he goes on stage. He has a
Oh, does
little
he?
tape in the
Interesting.
back room. This is his
Yeah,
one of his favorite albums, and Keith
yeah.
doesn't like much rock.
I'm trying
He
to think which tour it would have been, but AC/DC supported the Stones, didn't they?
mm,
In the States in the late
yeah,
70s. It might have been the Power Age album was
yeah.
the album at the time.
Keith bags a lot of people. He's a bit of a cranky
Yeah,
man, but he
yeah,
does not have a bad word to say about Akadaka. He loves them.
yeah,
So
yeah. Well, good for that. Yeah, good for him.
good for that. All right, your turn. Want to focus on a
All right, so
song?
the next song I'm going to go with is "Touch Too Much." Again, that was a single in the UK. I'm not sure it was a single anywhere else, but it was a single in the UK. My favourite AC/DC song. Well, along with Jailbreak, I think Jailbreak's a brilliant song as well. So either Touch Too Much or Jailbreak are my favourite AC/DC songs. Again, I think it's quite a commercial song. I think it's quite melodic. It's not as heavy, and yet when I've seen people do rankings, it normally features quite high in the rankings for people on the songs, but they normally talk about it as being one of their deep cuts and not being particularly commercial. So maybe it's just me that hears it that way. But I think great lyrics. I think it's got Bon Scott's typical sort of witty style of describing what's going on, a bit like Whole Lot of Rosie, the way he kind of the double entendres that he has,
Mm,
compares it to Venus with Arms, which I think is a brilliant line. So yeah, I just think very clever, lyrically, very typically AC/DC. Bon Scott sort of, as I say, cheek and humour in there, and yeah, I just think it's a great chorus again. Yeah, so that'd be my second pick.
nice pick. And recently, it was reintroduced into the band's song set after a considerable period of time when Axl Rose
Yeah,
briefly took the mic stand while Brian was
yeah,
recuperating from this hearing issue, which,
yeah.
to be quite frank, it was all very strange circumstances. But
Well, it was, but I don't know if you saw them, but I couldn't get tickets when they were first released. It sold out overnight, and then when Brian Johnson dropped away, they offered people their tickets back, and quite a few people took the tickets, took a refund. So that gave me a chance to get tickets to see them with Axel, and I thought he was great. I mean,
mm,
I was really reluctant and nervous about it, just because of his reputation with Guns N' Roses. But I thought he was great. The way he fitted in with Angus Young was excellent. He kind of knew it wasn't his band. He was very sort of respectful.
yes,
But the thing I liked most was his voice on the Bon Scott songs was great, and they did bring out quite a few songs that Brian Johnson never sings, presumably because it just doesn't suit his voice. So there was a
yeah,
lot of Bon Scott songs on there that I'd never heard live since I've seen him. In fact, some cases never heard live at all. And his voice seemed to fit it perfectly, actually. And I thought he was really good, and I'm really pleased I went. And to be honest, it rekindled my interest in Guns N' Roses, because even though I liked them back in the 80s, I'd kind of fallen out with them like a lot of people had. But that had kind of as I say, reignited my interest in them. And then I've seen them 2 or 3 times since, and I think he's great. And he has said it was life changing for him, because touring with AC/DC, just made him really disciplined about touring, and he couldn't get up to the antics he had to before, and he had to respect the fans, and it made him view things totally differently, that stint he did with AC/DC. And that's probably why he was able to get back together with Slash. Because I think, I can't remember, it was just before or just after, but it was about that time. But I think the fact that they've been doing it now for 10 years is all because of the discipline that he got from that short stint with AC/DC.
Yeah. I saw Guns N' Roses a couple of years ago, and there was some definite problems with Axl Rose's vocals, especially the upper range. It was kind of strained, but the bonscott material, maybe in a lower register, it fitted to a T. I haven't seen a lot of the Axl live footage, but I'll take your word.
It'd be worth seeing, because there's some good stuff. And I have to say, I saw Guns N' Roses about 4 years ago, and I thought his voice had gone. But then he did Hyde Park last year, and his voice was really good. And I wonder, because Hyde Park, they hadn't toured for a while, and I wonder whether the strain of touring had got to his voice 4 years ago, because his voice was pretty good at Hyde Park, a lot better than I was expecting it to be.
Well, as you get older, you've got to rest the larynx, and you can't just do 7 nights in a row. So maybe it comes down to the spaces in between the gigs to give the voice the necessary rest. But look, it's all conjecture. But I really, I will check that out. And it's always interesting to hear how some Bon Scotts have been reintroduced into the song.
Yeah,
that's great. The next song I'm going to put a spotlight on is Riff Raff of Power Age. I love that song. I think that's a live tour de force, and that's where Angus just goes bonkers on guitar. And it's sort of a song that builds up to a crescendo, and it's a bit of a showstopper. Lyrics are, a little bit, there's not a lot of depth to it. Tells a little bit of a story about a guy who's could be, caught up in a bit of trouble in Mexico. It's got a lot of Bonisms in the lyrics. Maybe don't read too much into it, but if there's a synergy between lyrics and music, this is it, because it's such an energetic song, and it's a showstopper, and it's really the part of the show where it's the tour de force of Angus showing off his guitar slinging skills. And folks, I think there's a concert where they played some theatre in Glasgow in 1978, and if memory serves me right, Angus goes off the stage and he goes up the stairs of the concert hall, or he mingles in the crowd, and he's just banging his head and grooving, and the crowd. I think
that was the tour, the If You Want Blood concert was whether, and I think, I don't know how many of the songs, but I think some of the songs on that album were recorded at that Glasgow gig.
But Riff Raff is definitely the song where he just gets his, the Energizer Bunny out, and just, it's a show.
And I suppose if I had one fault of Highway to Hell as an album, it hasn't really got one of those kind of songs where it's got that great guitar sort of where they break away from the song and let Angus rip. So you've got Riff Raff, or you've got something like Let There Be Rock, or something like that, which you can just, if I had one criticism of Highway to Hell, it's probably that is missing, I think, of this album.
Boy, oh boy, I wouldn't like to be supported by AC/DC in 1976, 77, 78. They'd blow you off stage. You'd have to come up with something, wouldn't you?
Well, there was a couple, I can't think of who it was, but there was a big band that actually threw them off the tour after a couple of gigs because of that reason. And
Deep
I can't
Purple.
remember who it was.
Rainbow,
was it
Rainbow
Purple?
Or Deep Purple?
It might have been, it might have been, well, it would have been Rainbow, wouldn't it, at the time? Yeah, and it probably was
I know
Rainbow,
Deep Purple at the one of the gigs. It was an open air gig in Victoria. I think it was the Sunbury, and there was a punch up between the roadies of Deep Purple and AC/DC. There was a little bit of fisticuffs, and this was Deep Purple in 1975. So it was the Tommy Bolin
Right.
era. And you can
Yeah.
imagine they're all strung out. And that's when Deep Purple was quite ultra jammy. It was sort of like the changing of the guard, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Deep
Absolutely.
Purple, as
Yeah.
much as I love the Come Taste the Band, but live, that was like, the
Yeah.
dinosaurs are walking out and then the new blood are coming
Yeah.
in. But,
Yeah.
oh, I
Absolutely.
wouldn't have liked to follow ACDC in that era.
No. I'll tell you a tour that would have been really good to see at that time. Um, was ACDC and Cheap Trick toured the States apparently,
That
and
would have been good.
depending on the location, depended who headlined. So whoever was stronger in a
Mm,
particular town. So they were paying theatre sort of size venues,
yeah.
and there's a few clips on YouTube of Robin Zander and Rick Nielsen talking about that
Mm,
time and how they got to know them, and how, and how there used to be a bit of competition between Angus Young and Rick Nielsen and who could be more manic on stage, which you can imagine, couldn't you, between them? And I think that would have been, I mean, because they're quite different in sound, aren't they? They're not an obvious pairing,
yeah.
but I guess back then people, didn't think too much about sort of putting bands into silos. But yeah, they used to alternate who headlined depending on who was the bigger draw in that particular town.
I would have loved if they had how's this, a triple billing of ACDC, The Angels, and Rose Tattoo,
Yeah,
late 70s. How
yeah,
good would that have been?
yeah.
Do it like an
Well, and
Albert's Roadshow.
funny you should say that. Actually, I mean the link there because I saw the Angels first, or Angel City as they were known over here at the time, and they opened for Cheap Trick in London.
Mm,
So that was the first. And I didn't know them before that. That would have been 79 or 80.
yeah.
And I was blown away. I thought they were, yeah. So yeah, I'm a big Angels fan, but they never really made it over here. Whereas Rose Tattoo did. I mean, I saw them at the Marquee on one of their first gigs over here, and they during the new wave of British heavy metal, they built quite a following.
Absolutely. And Rose Tattoo, that first album is just absolutely killer.
Yeah,
But
it is. Yeah,
that's for another show.
yeah.
All right. What's your next pick?
I'm gonna go with "Shot Down in Flames." I think the opener for side two.
Nice. Nice.
And just because I think it's so funny, the whole this really is Angus Young take the piss out of himself, and not Angus, and Bonscott take the piss out of himself. He
Mm,
goes up to a girl in the bar and sort of and chats her up, and he's shot down in flames over it all. And the fact that he's got that sort of self-depreciating humour, and again the riffing's really good. It's I think it's a heavy song, great solo, and then the end. Just that little bit of humour from Bon Scott, where he sort of goes, "Oh," as the
mm.
song finishes, as when he's been shot down in flame. So yeah, it makes me, even now, sort of 45 years later or whatever it is, I still laugh and smile every time I hear that end of the song. It just no matter what mood I'm in, it will pick me up and bring a grin to my face.
Just tongue-in-cheek lyrics. And
Yeah,
yeah, I love it. I love his word craft. He is a true
yeah.
rock poet. There's no doubt about it. He's one of the great
Well,
rock and
I
roll
have a
lyricists.
theory about his lyrics, which is I don't think he ever wrote a love song. I think his songs were he had five themes on which was either sex, drink, rock and roll, hell, or being a tough guy. So so whether it's sort of like a TNT type thing, or for the tough guy riff raff as you mentioned earlier, you've got Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be, or Highway to Hell, or Rock and Roll Damnation is effectively about hell. Number of songs about getting boozed up and drunk and all of that. So I don't think he ever wrote a love song. I think those were the five topics. Rock and roll, again, we spoke about how many songs did they write with rock and roll in the title? Long Way to
That's
Top if you
true.
want to rock and roll damnation again. So I don't think they ever wrote love songs. I think he had those five topics, and every song fits into one of those five topics.
Well, he probably left his love songs with the Valentines and the think,
Yeah, yeah,
and the
exactly.
pink suits or fraternity.
Yeah,
Folks,
yeah,
look at those bands, and your mind explodes that
yeah. And I
how
think and I
can this
think
be
that's
the
part
same
of the
Bond?
appeal. Yeah, and I think that's part of the appeal. I think of
Mm,
ACDC is that they are a bit different because of that. That they kind of stand out from a lot of rock
Yeah,
bands of the time. You
absolutely.
never you got a ballad, but you never got a soppy ballad, did you? That was the difference.
No, no, it was a ballad with bite.
Yeah, yeah,
There was
exactly.
always a bit of a sting in the tail. I'm going to pick Sin City. That's a nice little
Yeah,
rocker, and you've got the wonderful power chords of Malcolm Young. But I love the lyrics, and that bit where he does kind of a semi-spoken word, and it slows down,
yeah,
and he
yeah,
goes, "Ladders and snakes, ladders give, snakes take. Rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief. Ain't got to help, ain't got a hope in hell. That's my belief." Just I love it, and it's just a it's not a remarkable topic where he's talking about Vegas and the pitfalls of the gambling lifestyle and Sin City, but
yeah,
the way he sings just makes it compelling. And it's another one of these thing. ACDC are one of the great build-up bands where there's light and shade, and
yeah,
similar to what we were talking about, Quo a couple of episodes ago, that a lot of people think, oh, Quo are just boogie and very one pace, but AC/DC are similar to Quo because they use dynamics and light and shade really well for
yeah,
the drama of the song. And there's so much drama in this song
yeah.
where it does that blues. And, there
Oh, I
may be
think
two
it's a
chords,
fantastic song. Yeah,
do, do,
fantastic
do,
choice.
do, 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 and
Yeah,
builds up, it builds up.
yeah, fantastic. Yeah, no, brilliant choice. And I mean, funnily enough, that bit you talked about, I quote. I mean, I my grandkids they like board games, and whenever we're playing snakes and ladders, I actually say that to them. Snakes
Snakes
take,
take.
ladders give, snakes take. So they
Yeah,
have no idea where it comes from, but they'd be able to quote that to you if you played a game of the snakes and ladders with them.
absolutely. All right, what's your next pick?
If you want blood, you've got it. So it's one of those strange songs in that it's an album title of the live album, but it doesn't actually feature on that album. And again, I just think it's a great song, very well written. I love the lyrics. Um, it's almost like a statement of intent for AC/DC, isn't it? You can see why they
Mm,
picked it for the album title. Um, and talking of the album, I do think that's one of the best, if not the best, album covers of all time. I just think that's brilliant.
yeah.
And then that on the back. And me and my friends, we spent ages trying to work out where the other half of the guitar was. Was it broken? Was it broken and underneath Angus? Did it break and get thrown away by Bon? Is it just a very bad photo because they didn't think
Mm,
about it? But we spent hours. I mean, unbelievably, we spent hours trying to decide what happened to the front half of the guitar, that part of the guitar when he's laying on his back. So I think that's a fantastic album cover, and maybe because I love the album, that helps me, sort of brought me into the song. But I think the song's just a great statement of intent for the
yeah.
band. It kind of again sums them up. Um, uh, I think Bon's vocals are great. It's one of it. I mean, it's difficult to say Bon's a good singer in the classic sense, but he's a great singer in that he's got so much personality, and you recognise him instantly. And I think this is a great song from that point of view. It really showcases Bon Scott's vocals, I think.
Yeah.
Much like I think Sin City does, actually. I think that really showcases his vocal style. Um, so yeah, just a great song.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he is a good singer. I think the thing that sort of has the cut through for Bon is he's got such a great tone to his voice. He's got that rich tone. It's the tone that I think captivates the audience.
Yeah,
My next song that I was actually going to pick is Kicked in the Teeth. And that's another Bon ultra personality song. And I think, through Bon and his singing and the tonality, you get a sense of his personality. There are some singers that just sing and it's very pretty and you listen to it, but you don't get a sense of who the person is. And through the lyrics of Bon and through the tonality and the dynamics of how he's singing, you get a sense of who he is. You sort of know
yeah,
who he is. And Kicked in the Teeth is, a little bit of an ode to a bad woman, toxic relationship, but he keeps on coming back. Kicked in the teeth again. And if you look at his molars, I think he's been kicked in the teeth a few times.
Oh,
Or
it's
had
funny.
a few bar brawls.
It's I used to have a collection of a video with a collection of hits, which I think it was called something like what's it, classic balls or royal balls or something. And I used to, and this was in the 2000s, and you'd watch the videos from the first set all the way through to Highway to Hell, and it's at the Power Age stage that his teeth change. He had really bad teeth up to Power Age, and then after Power Age, he had really good teeth. So he obviously got them fixed at that point. Well, yeah, it's really funny and obvious when you see it. You can just see how good his teeth look after Power, or at the time of Power Age. But you can see with the case of bonscott, as soon as he got a bit of money, the first thing he spent it on wasn't fast cars or whatever. It was on his teeth.
Absolutely. All right. Well, maybe what's the last song that you'd like to spotlight? I think five each gives a good little summary.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to the second song in the album, Girls Got Rhythm.
Oh, yeah, lovely.
Again, brilliant sort of riff to it. Excellent chorus, sense of humour. It was a single over here. I think it was the second single over here. So it was played quite a lot on the radio, which always amuses me with ACDC back then. That they, because of the double entendres, they managed to get through the net and be played on sort of daytime radio in a way that a lot of rock bands couldn't. And this was a classic case of that double entendre with, she's got the backseat rhythm. So that no doubt at all what it was talking about. But again, yeah, just a great song. Really good live. I think that was one of the songs I saw with Axl Rose. I think that was another one that they played for the first time in a long time. And yeah, much like the others, I just think great chorus, great riffing, good solo, lovely lyrics from a Bonscott point. And I mean, I watched your show that you put up the other day about Thin Lizzy, and you were talking about Phil Lynott's storytelling, and he is classed, isn't he, as one of the best storytellers. But I think Bonscott was one of the best storytellers as well.
Yeah.
And yet, but he never seems to get the credit for it. Everybody seems to look at it almost as if they were just sort of typical sort of sex and rock and roll type lyrics, without actually realizing how good he was at telling a story, and how the humor and the weaving and those double entendres.
Yeah,
I thought were fantastic.
I think it depends in what circles. I think
Maybe.
he does get credit in certain circles, and in some circles, maybe not so. But one thing I wanted to talk about Highway to Hell, about your album, is the introduction of the gang vocals. So Mutt Lange, the production on this album is very spick. And you can see that he's building up to some of the works that he was, made his name for in the 80s, which was ultra smooth, commercial, sophisticated, a lot of technology, but with the vocals. And I think he wanted to build up a more beefier AC/DC sound with tapering the sound with a lot of gang vocals. And I read that the band was a little bit resistant of it initially, but they went with the flow, and it does add a little bit of sonic oomph to a lot of the songs.
Yeah,
and that gang vocals is something that's used a lot in hard rock and heavy metal in the 80s. So like hair metal, a typical hair metal, or hard rock album in the 80s will have so many gang vocals, and you can sort of take it right back from Highway to Hell is where it started. That's my opinion.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's interesting. Up to that, I would have described the backing vocals as yob rock vocals. You think of TNT and the oi, oi, and that kind of thing. And yet with this, it did change to more that gang vocals and a bit more harmonising rather than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm glad you picked up the Matt Lang, because I meant to mention that earlier. I think this is one of his best albums, because later he became so over everything that it almost every album sounded like a Matt Lang album with a different band. Whereas at this stage, he still allowed the bands to have their personality and sound like they would normally sound. And I mean, again, a bit like you, I've read interviews and seen clips and things, and um, clearly the band were skeptical at first, but apparently he helped Bonscott singing by helping him, showing him how to breathe properly when he sang, and let him be able to hold the notes longer and better, and that kind of won them over. And apparently there's a great little story that I saw. I think it was Malcolm Young said about that Matt Lang sat down with Angus and said, right, I'm going to show you how to do the solo on Highway to Hell. And Angus said, fuck off like hell you are. And yet he persevered. And all he did, he didn't teach him the solo, but he just showed him certain things he could do in the solo that just made it sound better. And Malcolm said from that point onwards, they trusted him, because they could see he wasn't going to try to change them. He wasn't going to sort of be condescending, but he just had little tricks that he could use that just made the sound a little bit more commercial, maybe a little bit smoother, and they bought into it, and clearly it lasted for a couple of albums, because I think for those about to rock became overproduced by that time. But I think this one and Back in Black, although Back in Black sounds different, I still don't think it sounds too produced. So I think at that time he was linked bands, and the other band who I really liked at the time he also produced was the Boomtown Rats. He did what's it called, Tonic for the Troops and Fine Art Surfacing, which was about the same time. And again they sound different, because you can hear Matt Lang's involvement, but you can also hear the band being allowed to be the band. And I think the last time that he did that was Foreigner 4. He doesn't hugely change Foreigner, I don't think, with Foreigner 4, though it does give it a bit of a shape. But after that, I think that's when he started having much more of an influence, probably because he had the confidence and he had the reputation where he could actually tell bands what to do. So he definitely did bring a kind of a bit of a commercial edge, which is probably why the album did so well. It tweaked it enough to give it that mass appeal. I mean, it's apparently 10 million worldwide, so it's nothing like Back in Black is, but it's still a big selling album.
It's a huge selling album.
10 million.
It's not, I think not too shabby at all.
No, and I think the other thing with it is with what Matt Lang brought to it is you can. I'm trying to think how to. As you said, those Vanda and Young albums, they all sound similar, don't they, in the production? They're not the same, but they have a similar sound. Whereas this is the first one where it almost sounded like it was produced for the mass market rather than produced for a sort of more of a fan base, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think Atlantic Records didn't have the confidence that Vanda and Young production, those type of sound, those records that were produced by Vanda and Young would get played on FM American radio. So they wanted to bring in a producer that had a little bit more commercial smarts. But my opinion is I like the Vanda and Young sound. I think it's a timeless sound. It's organic. It sounds fresh. It sounds in the studio. But, those Mutt Lange albums sound wonderful too, but they're different sounding. They're very commercial.
They are.
But listen to the space between the notes, the spatial seconds between guitar chords in Back in Black. It's sort of metronomic. It's like every note is in the right place.
Yeah.
But, I tip my hat. But I just personally prefer the raw, the grungy, the live feel of those Vanda and Young AC/DC albums.
But it was a good point you made, though, because I never really thought about AC/DC being, if you like, the pioneers of those gang vocals. But now you've said
gang vocals,
yeah, absolutely. Now you've said it, I can see it, but I've never really thought about it before.
Yeah, I mean, Motley Crue, Poison, Rat,
Yeah,
Wasp, all those, it was just
yeah,
prevalent. That was just a
yeah.
cliche of hair
It
metal.
was.
Bon Jovi all goes
Yeah,
back to Mutt Lang and the gang vocals.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
that was another reason that they got Cliff in the band because apparently he could hold a tune. So the gang
Yeah,
vocals don't necessarily have to be like a Doobie Brothers beautiful, sweet harmonies. It just hold
yeah,
a melody,
yeah,
push something, but give it a little bit more oomph. And
yeah,
it's sort of like papering the sound a bit. And that's what the radio presenters or the DJs in America sort of like that sort of music. They like
yeah,
that sort of harmonies brought into it. So they were,
yeah,
I guess, in that era with 1978, 79, what was the American landscape? Styx,
yeah. It's
Foreigner,
very
REO
AOR and punk rock, wasn't
Speedwagon,
it?
yeah, AOR. But I'm not saying it's AOR, but putting a bit more melody into it.
No, no, no. I think it was moving it that way. Yeah, it was giving it that
Mm,
sheen. Yeah,
yeah. All right. Well, my last pick. Look, I could talk about this whole album till the cows come back in, but I like Down Payment Blues. I think it's an honest song in the sense that it's just Bon. It's his personality. It's rich. It's got a lot of drama. It's got a lot of build up. Yeah, I just think it's one of, the energy and groove with such a simple guitar riff is just mind boggling. That's the thing about ACDC. But look, their songs are complicated. They're very simple. But what they get out of these simple guitar riffs and simple chords is just boundless. It's just,
yeah,
timeless. And we're still talking about them in 2024. They're a band that sort of defies trends. And I think you may have been talking to me offline, but they're one of those bands where trends just come back full circle and come back to them.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I
So,
think. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there was a couple of bands like this, I guess. But if you look at through the 80s, there wasn't many bands from the 70s that didn't tie themselves into the 80 fashions of something, whether it was the
mm,
hair metal like Kiss or an Aerosmith did, or whether it's the technology like ZZ Top did. There was very few 70s bands that didn't try to pick. I mean, Queen was a good example of one that kind of followed what was going. But ACDC never did. I mean, whether you like those albums or don't like those albums, ACDC was just ACDC. They just kept doing what they did. And the same in the 90s. They didn't. There's no grunge album from ACDC.
mm.
They just kept doing what they did. So yeah, I think they did. They did sort of. They are timeless, and I think they have their own style, and they just stuck with it. And fashions changed, but fashions came back to ACDC every now and then. And
Yeah.
and now now they're such a big band and so classic that probably fashion, they'll never go out of fashion now, but I think during the times that they did go out of fashion, they just came back, they brought fashion back with them. So
Well, before we wrap up this show, maybe tell us a few honourable mentions if you had to sneak
yeah,
a number two
I
and a
think I
number
will.
three.
Yeah, I think I will. So if I was going to sneak my favourite, I think if I was going to go with the Brian Johnson album, I'd probably go with Razor's Edge. It's not. I mean, to be honest, I'd go with Back in Black, but trying to avoid the obvious. I'd probably go with Razor's Edge. I think that's a really good album. That kicked off the 90s. They'd had a bit of a dip in form, but that sort of seemed to, certainly in the States, bring them back. Um, so I think that's a really good album. And I really like, we talked about this off air, I think, as well, Power Up. Um, I think that's a really good album. Their latest album. It's the one that, I mean, interestingly, it's 3 years old now, and it's the one they're now about to tour. 4 years old. It's the one they're about to tour. So, but I think that's a really good album. I still listen to it a lot. I think it's got 2 or 3 really good tracks on it. Shot in the Dark, I think, is up there with any other AC/DC song as a real classic. And if I was going to go back to Bon Scott, my other Bon Scott one would have been Power Age Like Yours. So So there'd be my honourable mentions. Another album I listen to a lot. So I mean, AC/DC have always said they will only do a greatest hits album when they stop. So the fact they haven't brought out one yet means they haven't stopped. But the closest they ever got to a greatest hits album was this, the Iron Man 2 soundtrack, which has got a lot of their songs. It's got a few deep tracks on it as well. But I play this quite a lot because it is like the greatest hits, really. So it's got Shoot to Thrill, Rock and Roll Damnation, Thunderstruck, Back in Black, If You Want Blood. But as I say, it's got some deep cuts like Guns for Hire, Cold Hearted Man, Evil Walks, War Machine. So yeah, that's the closest to a greatest hits, and I play that quite a lot. So I wouldn't put that as an honourable mention because it's not a studio release as such. But yeah, they're the albums are kind of my go-to albums for AC/DC, as well as the live ones, which I play a lot.
Well, mine would be Highway to Hell and Back in Black. I think those two would be fine musical companions on that desert island.
Yeah.
But I think I'd be pretty happy just listening to this Power Age. Love it. Which is
I think the thing about Back in Black, which I think is funny, is they've probably sold 1 million copies just whilst we've been talking about it on here. I mean, it's just unbelievable how big that. I mean, it's the biggest selling rock album of all time. After Thriller, it's the biggest selling album of all time. I mean, it's just unbelievable, really, that a band like AC/DC could be that popular. And I think, people talk about bands that when they tour, I think every time they tour, they're still really touring Back in Black. I'm sure when they come over here, 40 years after it was released and they do the tour in the summer, the sales will go through the roof again on Back in Black. They just always seem to be, every tour is almost for that album as well as whatever their latest one is.
That's an interesting point because there are some bands, classic rock bands, that seem to, when they do tour, they seem to just tour around that one album, like Deep Purple and Machine Head. Yeah, just
I mean, to be credit to AC/DC, they always put 2 or 3 new songs in the set from the previous album or the latest album, and they do have certainly every time. I mean, I've seen them pretty much every time they've come over to the UK since '79. And they do mix up the set quite a bit. I mean, you get quite a few of the classics, but you never know whether you'll get a Rock and Roll Damnation or not. I mean, they play it a lot, but you're not guaranteed you're going to get that, and you're not guaranteed you're going to get a Shoot to Thrill, even though they play that quite a lot. So they mix the set up quite a lot. So they're definitely they're not one of these that are just playing the same songs every single time. But I've got no doubt that they're really still touring Back in Black. I mean, that's the album everybody knows, and will be the one that, I mean, they'll probably sell some copies of Power Up off the back of the tour, but they'll sell a lot more of Back in Black, I think. So
wonderful having you on the show, Parish of Rock.
Yeah, it's been really good fun. Really enjoyed it.
Fun, folks. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Click the bell. Tell us what your favorite AC/DC album is. What album would you bring to the desert island? Me and Parish, we're going to do some more shows in 2024, picking something about the genre of rock coming soon. Cheers.
Absolutely. Lovely. Thank you.
See you.